Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, God of hosts, Pharisees, let my people go. I'm Elder Pop Samuel of Elders of Israel, Elder Seer, Hebrew. Of course, you know Elder Stephen. We have another elder, Elder Johanna, Elder Jesse, Elder Abba. They are colleagues. As of now, we've been teaching. Of course, you know that. We're calling out the elders that know spiritual interpretation. Carnal, you can see that. It's like reading a novel. Anybody can break that down, reading like a novel. Captain Shemaiah of IUIC of Atlanta tried to challenge us on the radio show. Ask him about it. We don't mean to embarrass anyone. You got to know the spiritual interpretation. Captain Amazing Amaziah tried to challenge us of IUIC. See, young man, that's the reason why your master Kanai, your master Nathaniel ran. They're gonna run because they know they cannot challenge us. Okay? 1 Corinthians 2:15 says this: how can a carnal man judge a spiritual man? A spiritual knows carnal. It's hard for a carnal man to know spiritual interpretation. It is not something that instantly you learn. God have to give you this interpretation himself. And we're going to go through scriptures and prove this. But as I say, we're looking for elders who know how to translate from carnal to spiritual. Elder Stephanie and I, the guys I named off, we know. We pretty much know. Those guys that I named off are our colleagues. They know. They're well schooled. Elder Stephanie is well schooled. Elder Johanna, well schooled, and myself. All praises go to Most High, God of Israel. But we're going to go ahead and touch on some precepts to prove that a lot of people just not going to get it. And we know who's going to get it and who not going to get it. They're going to be confounded. So we're going to turn to the first one. It's Deuteronomy chapter 28 and 24. And it reads, let's start at 23. Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 23. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. What does that mean? The head supposed to be over you is Christ. That's your head that's supposed to be over you, than God. Okay? Let's go to it. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 3. And it reads, 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 3. But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. That's how it's supposed to be in order. God, Christ, man, woman. Okay? Carnally. I have to mention that all the time. And also spiritual too. Because it's something was also in there that I did not mention. That's another class. But let's go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 23 again. And it reads, and thy heaven that is over thy head shall be as brass. These are curses. Now the brass are men. These men are not gold. They're going to be brass. They're supposed to be gold, but they're brass. Let's see. Isaiah, let's go to Isaiah chapter 13 verse 12. And it reads, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man that the golden wedge of fear. So, when you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and 23, and thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass. Christ is not over your head over there. You see, these are curses once the Israelites fail from understanding. Now you got men as brass. They're not gold. And the earth that is under thee shall be iron. You see that? So it's going to be hard, okay? Carnal understanding. That's what it is, basically. The next precept is going to go to Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 7. And it reads, but they also have erred through wine. Wine is doctrine. Micah 2:11. Write that down. And through strong drink, meaning they drunk of that wine, or out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They drunk on that doctrine. They are swallowed up of wine, that false doctrine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They drunk on. They err in vision. They cannot see because they don't have a spiritual interpretation to see. They stumble in judgment. See? For all tables are full of vomit. See that? And filthiness. Meaning it's no good. The scriptures are no good because they drunk on doctrine. So that there is no place clean. Whom shall he teach knowledge? Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? The doctrine that he's talking about is John chapter 18, verse 19. Christ's doctrine. Write that down. Them that are weaned from the milk. He's saying those that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. The ones that is weaned from the milk gonna understand this. Those camps are still teaching carnally. That's why when Shemaiah went against us, Elder Stephen corrected him. That's why when Amaziah went against me about that tree, he was corrected. They haven't even changed. So you got to get weaned from the milk to understand what we're talking about. That's why you can't get it. You still stuck in carnal understanding. So when Shemaiah read the book, he read it carnally. Everybody saw that in Genesis chapter 26, verse 12. What you was reading. That is carnal. It's a parable that you did not even see, and you fell into that trap. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. For with stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to this people. That's another tongue. His doctrine. We're not talking about another language. It's another, as far as definitions that you need to find out what everything means in this Bible, because it's totally different. Just like we read, gold is actually a stone out of the earth. But gold can be a refined man, a polished man. You know this, a tree can be actually a tree. That's wood in the forest. But also a tree can be a teacher in the forest among other trees. The sun. But the sun is also wisdom and knowledge. The moon is up in the sky. Yes. But it's according to that's Ecclesiastes 7:11. Or it's the sun. The moon is Psalms 89, 34 through 37. You got to get this because it's going to be established forever. So the definitions is different. So when we read the Bible, we see it with a stammering lips and another tongue. You couldn't see that. So I'm talking to Shemaiah and Amaziah. They couldn't have seen. So when we speak, we know exactly what we're talking about. That's why you are confounded. Because when we explain it to you, you saw it. And you still don't want to change your doctrine. And there's a reason why. I understand. But we're going to keep reading. We're going to go to, write down Hosea 6:6. You need to get the Most High's understanding. Okay? Go to Proverbs chapter 4:7. Again, we're calling out to elders who understand spiritual interpretation. And if you do not understand it, keep watching it. Keep watching, okay? Keep watching us and pray. Because we can only tell you where it's at, but it's the only way we can give it to you is the Most High. And I'm serious with this, okay? And we're going to read Proverbs chapter 4:7. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all that get understanding. See, when you see understanding, we automatically say the Son. You see, we automatically know it's talking about the Son. To prove that point, let's go to Ecclesiastes 7:11. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the Son. See that? That see the understanding. So when we see Son, it means understanding. When we see understanding, it means Son. It's just in our head now. See, so you got to learn how to speak and read spiritually. So when you see a word, you know what it means automatically. Like when we see a sheep, we see Psalms 1:3. Automatically it pops in our head. It's a follow. It's a follow. A sheep is a follow. Automatically we know this. You see Ezekiel 34:31. The flocks of my pastures are men. The flocks are men. We already know when we see the word flock, it means men. It's a flock following someone. You see that? So that's why they confounded right now. We know the definition. We know what things mean. Actually, what it means now. Go to Proverbs 22:17. Bow down thine ear and hear the words of the wise, and apply thine heart, which is the mind. This is another one. The heart. It's not right here in your chest. Of course, this the heart. But when you think it spiritually, it's right here. Your mind. You see that? Matthew 15. Write it down. Mark chapter 7:21. That's your mind. It's a different definition. The loins of the mind. 1 Peter chapter 1:13. The loins of the mind. When you think of loins, it's your stomach. But when God feeds you, He goes into your mind. That's how He feeds you. Your mind. Loins of the mind. When you digesting food, carnal food that you get from the grocery store, it goes in your tummy and it gives you nutrients, right? But God have different definitions. So the mind, when He feeds you this, is food for your mind. You see that? So that's the reason why they confound it. So when we read something, they can't see it. And we're going to get it out of the scriptures, like I said. And this, after the Most High gave us laws and ordinance and the judgment it was going to be. Okay? For instance, when the biggest enemy that you have, people say that, like in Deuteronomy curse, He said He's going to send your enemy against you. Okay? Your enemy is Romans chapter 6:6. We're going to come back to Deuteronomy, but let's go to Romans chapter 6:6. This is your biggest enemy right here. Knowing this, that our old man, the old person in us, is crucified with Him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we shall not serve sin. So that old man, the old person, is your biggest enemy. That's your biggest enemy. So our job, being the seed, the carnal seed of Abraham, goes back further than that to Shem. Shem had a son. He was Hebrew. He became Hebrew. The Hebrews, when you read Genesis, everybody's supposed to dwell in Shem's house, meaning under his doctrine. The understanding, Shem was going to get this understanding from God. So people had to go to the Hebrew to understand the scrolls, because that's what happened. So it handed on down, come on down to Abraham. When you go through Genesis chapter 14, verse 13, they call Abraham the Hebrew. So they actually went to Abraham for some understanding, because he was Hebrew and he understood that. Come on down to when you get to the Pharisees, when they sat in Moses' seat. They lost the spiritual interpretation, because those people are gods. You're supposed to not worship any other god but God. So, going back to that old man, Romans chapter 6 and verse 6, that's your biggest enemy. So if you then do your job, killing the old man in you, then you get with somebody else with that same old person in them. That person becomes your enemy. That person becomes your enemy. That person your enemy. That person your enemy. That person your enemy. Because you did not destroy that old person in you. Because that's what Abraham was doing. He was teaching people how to kill the old man in them, which is their enemy. So when God said He's going to send your enemies against you, that's what He's saying. Because you should have done your job. Destroy those enemies. That first person is the enemy of you. And stay focused on that. Then help that person destroy that enemy in him. And so forth. Then you wouldn't have all those enemies. That's what He's saying. Because you dropped the ball, Israel. I'm talking to the carnal Israel. That's the reason why. Now you got multiple enemies. And the biggest enemies right now is your leadership. Well, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 29 and 28. And the Lord rooted them out of their land. Remember that word, rooted. And the Lord rooted them out of their land in anger. What land? See, the land that you're thinking about is a total different land what I'm thinking about. You see, I'm thinking about the land is that doctrine. It's a doctrine also called Jerusalem. Zephaniah chapter 12 and verse 6. So you're not going to get that understanding anymore. You see, let's go to it and we'll come back here. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 6. And it reads, "In that day will I make the governors of Judah like an hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in sheath, and they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem, the doctrine, shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem." It's a doctrine. So when you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 29 and verse 28, and the Lord rooted them out of their land, Jerusalem, the doctrine, in anger and in wrath and a great indignation, and cast them into another land. What you think? What land he cast you? Egypt. Back in Egypt. The house of bondage. Psychological prison. Because, let me tell you something. Jerusalem is the mother of us all, which is free. Galatians 4 and 26. Write that down. It's a doctrine. This Egypt doctrine, you're in a psychological prison. We tend to the spiritual side. Read that again. Deuteronomy 29 and 28. "And the Lord rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land, and it is this day." Still in a psychological prison. But write down this, Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 2, he said his doctrine gonna pour out. He choosing the ones he want. The Most High doing this. He's doing this. He teaching whom he want. And if you hate anyone, he's not gonna give it to you. Because that's murder. You hate your brother. So, go to Exodus chapter 20 verse 2. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. That's anybody. He don't care. It can be anybody. Your leadership, he don't care. It can be even you. Because this temple belonged to God. 1 Corinthians 3 and 16. 1 Corinthians 6:19. I have to do what God says. That old man got to go. I studied the spiritual interpretation because that's what God's speech is. Okay? The carnal, anybody can read that carnal. It's deceit. You can read Romans chapter 8. That carnal minded is enmity, hatred towards God. He don't want that carnal understanding. He wants the spiritual interpretation. Hosea chapter 6 verse 6. Isaiah 55 verse 8. Write those precepts down. I want you to go to Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17. Think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. He did it. Verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. You see that? See what a lot of camps doing right now? They're still doing the carnal interpretation of the law, but it's been transformed to do it spiritual now. The law is still here. It's not carnal. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 7, 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood it would, if the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek? You see? And not be called after the order of Aaron, which is carnal. For the priesthood being changed, the priesthood was changed. It's changed. Malachi 3 and 6 say, I change not. So everything in this book he have not changed. So you got to change when he changed. You follow Christ. So some people went to the left, Christ went to the right. So we kept following Christ. The priesthood been changed. For the verse 12. For the priesthood being changed, there is made a necessity of change also in the law. It went from carnal to spiritual interpretation. For he of whom these things are spoken pertaining to another tribe, of which no man gave attendance at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah. He's Judah. Why he doing the job as a Levite? It changed. Of which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood. See? And it is yet far more evident, for that after the similitude of Melchizedek, there arises another priest, who is made not after the law of carnal commandment, is enmity toward God, but after the power of it in his life. That's spiritual. It's in his life. It's spiritual. For he testified, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. You follow Christ now. But there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going before, for the weakness and unprofitable thereof. For the law made nothing perfect. The carnal law made nothing perfect. But the bringing of the better hope did, that you could kill that old man, because it's spiritual, by the which he draw nigh unto God. Go to 1 Corinthians 15:56. And it reads, the sting of death is sin. He changed it. So it's sin when you're doing that carnal law. He wants you to do a spiritual interpretation law. He changed. He changed not. It's still in this book. Everything he could have changed is still in this book. So now you have to do it spiritually. The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. You see that? So we tend to the spiritual interpretation, as you see. But go to 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 1. The law's still here. You got to kill the old man. That's the animal sacrifice now. Ecclesiastes 3:18. You got to sacrifice that old man, that beast inside of you, and let the Most High take over your body. Let Christ, which is the Word of God, come in. You see, pray for understanding. It will, but you cannot hate anyone. That's why a lot of camps have made them worse. How are you going to teach the stranger, the Gentiles, convert the Gentiles? Because that's what Abraham was doing. He was circumcising their mind. We've had many classes over it. How you going to do it now? It's harder now. The Bible says he's going to make the Pharisees going to make it worse. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the later time some shall depart from the faith, which is spiritual. What it's saying, depart from the faith, it's the law of the faith. Romans chapter 3 verse 27. Write that down. Giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats. Spiritual understanding. That's why when Elder Stephen gave that class through Shemaiah, he didn't understand. Because he didn't have any meat. Because they always say this, stay in the meat, brother. They always say, stay in the milk, brother. Stay in the milk, brother. They don't have any meat to give. You're not going to get the kingdom unless you get this meat, the spiritual interpretation. It's just the way it is. The Most High said the teachers, he's going to be harder on. James chapter 3 verse 1. Write that down. Luke chapter 12 verse 47. They're going to receive more stripes than anybody. Write that down. Amos chapter 3 verse 1 and 2. Why Israel, excuse me, they keep looking at what happened in slavery. Why God say Israel gonna suffer more than anybody? Because they supposed to have known. They took an oath to teach, to convert the world. Now it's enemies everywhere. Ezekiel chapter 3 verse 6, it said, God said if he would have told anybody, any other nation, and he mean any other nation, Esau, Amalek, we don't care. He said any other one, they would have did exactly what he told them to do. Read it yourself. Ezekiel chapter 3 verse 6. Isaiah chapter 8 verse 13 and 14 is to Israel. It's carnal Israel, this is spiritual Israel. The next class I'm going to be given is Caleb. Caleb, a Gentile who's indoctrinated into the tribe of Judah. Check it out. The one that rolled with Joshua. Check it out. Again, we're looking for elders that knows spiritual interpretation. And if it's your desire, if you're praying for this understanding, keep praying. The Most High will give it to you if you deserve it. He will give it to you. This thing is about to end. We don't have too much longer. We just don't. We will upload your video. You will be in classes, personal classes. You'll be given personal phone numbers. I want you to email us if you desire to be an elder. You have to know spiritual interpretation. You got to. Keep learning. And with all that said, look for that video that's coming out. Caleb. This is Elder Pop Samuel of Elders of Israel. Elder Seer, Hebrew. Shalom.